special thing in store. The light bulb inside my head says, get out and play, 'cause you never feel this way. It's my lucky day, it's my lucky day. It's my lucky day, my lucky day. Don't need a pot of gold, a rabbit's foot or to be told. It's my lucky day, it's my lucky day.
Hello, my friends. Happy Tuesday. I am so excited to be here with you today. And I'm so excited to have my friend Jessika here with us. Jessika Portney Amini is an ICF certified coach, a keynote speaker, facilitator, and founder of Journey On, a 100% woman-owned small business. She also runs Women Empower Women, a leadership community for purpose-driven women leaders. Jessika is driven to advance the growth of women in leadership, supporting female leaders looking to grow their influence, have their voices heard, and take purposeful action to shift the status quo. She is passionate about accelerating social change through conscious leadership, enabling leaders to thrive with intention, authenticity, compassion, and inclusivity. Prior to her founding her leadership firm, Jessika managed leadership programming for federal executives at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. Her approach to leadership has been informed by the cross-cultural experiences she's sought out, pursuing a graduate degree and teaching English in Rome, facilitating Fulbright fellowships for mid-career leaders from 90 different countries, and implementing U.S. aid projects for Egyptian women pursuing a STEM education. Jessika obtained a master's in government and politics with a concentration in international relations from St. John's University in Rome, and a bachelor's dual degree in communications and Italian language and literature from the University of Maryland, College Park. And holy cow, Jess, I knew you were impressive, but holy cow, reading your bio, you were so impressive. And I'm so glad you're here.
Well, I'm so happy to be here with you, Amanda. And there's nothing more awkward than having to sit there while you hear someone else read your bio. So thank you for doing it so lovely. And thank you so much again for this invitation. It's really great to see you and spend this time together.
It feels like ages since the last time we talked. So really excited we get to have this chat, and really excited that we're going to be talking about the Enneagram. So the Enneagram, can you just start by telling us what it is, how you found it, what you do with it, just kind of wherever your story starts and where it takes us?
Yeah. It's interesting because we're at a time where the Enneagram has kind of exploded in popular culture, and it has such a long, rich, layered history that I feel like has gotten lost in the mix of kind of the fad around knowing your type, and ultimately, unfortunately, I think sometimes pigeonholing people in their type, and the stereotyping that can be done around that, which is never the point of any personality system, let alone one as deep and meaningful as the Enneagram. And so I would like to caveat anything that I'm sharing that I could be getting the details wrong, right? I'm not like everything is just super solidified in my head, but I've been studying the Enneagram now for, it's been 4 years that I've been studying it in-depthly. I'm currently in the process of becoming a certified Enneagram practitioner. So I've been involved in that training program for a couple of years now. And the Enneagram has really draws its history from kind of a rich understanding of sacred geometry. It's a very complex looking symbol, and I can actually hold it up here for Oh, that's Ona. Hold it up here for folks where you can see just there's a larger circle, and then there's all of these different triangles and lines that you see. So there's the law of 3 in here, the law of 7, and of course the circle itself and the number 9, and all of that holds immense significance. And ultimately, it's found a lot of its roots in Western religion, so in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And it has been brought over by the father was, his name was Gurdjieff, his last name was Gurdjieff, who really brought it over to the US. And it was really adopted within the Jesuit community. So it really has a strong foundation in understanding who people are, what their purpose is here on this earth, and the idea that we are all one and that we are all aspects of these different types, different essences of humanity, and that each one is equally as valuable as the other. And the goal really of learning the Enneagram is to understand your type so that you can, of course, bring compassion to yourself, which I think is really incredible. And the work is really around understanding and getting in touch with the gifts of all of the types. And that's really a lifetime's journey. I actually was lucky enough to be introduced to the Enneagram by my mom. My mom is a beautiful seeker of meaning and personal growth, and was using the Enneagram in her own work. And she shared it with me. It started with a book called The Wisdom of the Enneagram. And I started reading about it. And for many people, and this was certainly the case for me, was that kind of cringy feeling when you see yourself on paper in that way. And then also, I think another reaction was a sense of just deeper awareness around what motivates me, because that's ultimately what the Enneagram is about. It's not about your behaviors. It's not about your when you were born, where human design and astrology draws from. It's more about where does your attention and energy go, and what are you focused on as you move through the world. And so it was just really powerful for me to see myself through the lens of the Enneagram. And I started reading about it and sharing it with friends, and really exploring it, for my own personal development. And then it was in 2020 that I started actually, while I was on my journey to become a coach, to start doing a deeper dive and seeing the value of the Enneagram in the coaching space. And so now I use the Enneagram with all of my clients. It's part of our process of self-discovery and self-understanding, and utilizing the Enneagram not only to continue deepening our self-awareness, but also how do we bring kindness and compassion to ourselves through understanding our type.
I love that so much. First of all, can I say that was probably the most beautiful explanation of what the Enneagram is.
Thank you.
It was so much more graceful and comprehensive than what usually comes out of my mouth. Like, it's like an old way of like knowing who you are, and and people are like, why do I want to know that? But just made it sound so inviting. And I love what you said about having self-compassion, because that is a journey I have been on. And I will confess here, it will not be a surprise to anybody who has not heard me say it before. I'm a huge fan of all the assessments. Like, if there's an assessment I can take that will teach me something about myself, I'm like totally in on it. Um, but the Enneagram was something I kind of like glossed over
Hmm.
until until mid last year. And I heard a podcast. I don't normally listen to the Glennon Doyle We Can Do Hard Things podcast, but she had Suzanne Stabile, who's the godmother of the Enneagram, on there. So I was like, I'm going to listen to this episode.
Hmm.
And I absolutely loved the way she talked about the Enneagram, and how she said, which is very similar to what you said about, seeing yourself on paper. She said, you'll know your type when you get really pissed off with what you hear. So, can you walk us through what the types are and what we can expect to find with each type?
Yeah. Before I do that, I'm so curious, Amanda, if you wouldn't mind sharing with me, what is it, do you think, that made you gloss over the Enneagram? Is it what I named about it being just such a fad right now?
Um, it was a combination of certain people in my life posting about it on Instagram, like,
Mhm.
but just like, I'm a 4, like all the time. And just being distracted by all the other shiny things.
Sure.
I think it was just, I don't think there was anyone in my life at that point who was studying it seriously that I knew, or using it seriously. And I think that's probably why.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. That Instagram version of
Yeah.
how the Enneagram is being utilized, and just such a missed opportunity for this incredible tool. So, one thing that I would offer that I think is really beautiful through the school that I'm studying through of the Enneagram is that when we talk about our types, we don't say I'm this type. We say I lead with type 7. And it's a nuance of language that creates a bit of separation because type is not everything, right? We have our lived experiences, we have the human bodies that we walk around in. And so, my experience being a type 7 might be very leading with type 7, might be very different than someone else who has a different lived experience leading with type 7. So, I would start by saying that Enneagram is beautiful as a roadmap for understanding oneself, and within the larger tapestry of who you are as a human and how important that is to be taken into consideration. So I really just want to start with that before going into, what are the types. And I will also say that for some people, it is that seeing yourself on paper. For other people, it's really a journey. And because we are all of the types, we have aspects of all of them within us. It can be a journey to find your Enneagram home base. In fact, I mistyped for a while, and it was through kind of deeper understanding of that core motivation and really getting to know myself better that I was able to kind of dig deeper into that. So I would also say don't be discouraged if that's not your experience with the Enneagram. And that's also why I've been moving through a program where it's not just an assessment that one takes to uncover your type. I've been trained in conducting typing interviews. So I actually spend 50 to 60 minutes with someone asking questions around the core motivations of all of the types. And with that training, with those questions, with my intuition and my Enneagram knowledge, I then offer some types that might resonate with that individual for them to then go spend their time kind of, they're the ultimate authorities on themselves, reflecting on and seeing what feels like it fits for them. And it might, sometimes it's a spot on, that's it, and sometimes it's not. So not to be discouraged by that. So I know I just said a lot, so I'll just pause there before I go into anything else.
Yeah, no, I think that's so beautiful because I think with any assessment, There are some we take and we're like, oh, that is definitely me. And there are other ones that I'm like, this is not really feeling like me yet. But the more work I do, the more aha moments I get. So I absolutely loved how you framed that for us, Jess.
Yeah, yeah. So did you want me to move through the types? Okay.
Yeah, if you would.
So I do also still just want to have just some notes up for myself so that I can speak eloquently to these and do them justice. So what you'll see in kind of how the Enneagram is talked about, that there are a lot of names for the Enneagram, and the word is not coming to me, but like titles for what the types are. I'm not going to share any of those, just because sometimes I feel like they can feel like a label that doesn't really resonate with people, and I don't want that to be the takeaway from what I'm sharing. But I'll just move around the circle, and so I'm not moving in any particular order. Again, there's all the types are equally as valuable. There's no type that is better than another type. Gosh, the Enneagram is so complicated, Amanda. It's like I don't know where to start. I think what I will start with is that the Enneagram teaches us, and this is something that I think is quite intuitive for us if we really sit with it, that there are 3 centers of intelligence, that we all have access to 3 centers of intelligence: our head, our heart, and our body. And so there's that head knowing, that cognitive knowing. There's that heart space of really when you feel that connection. And then there's that gut knowing, when you know it in your gut. And we have all 3 of them. However, there are some of us that have a tendency more to lead with our heads, some with our hearts, and some with our bodies. And so I'll start by introducing the types that way. The types that live or have that like center of intelligence in the body are types 8, 9, and 1. And again, they're all next to each other: 8, 9, and 1. And so all of these types in the center of the body also have a shared kind of emotion that lives underneath, that is expressed in different ways depending on the type. And so there's a lot of anger underneath the types 8, 9, and 1. And this certainly doesn't mean that these people are angry people, but there's a path of getting in touch with that anger and how that shows up that's important for these types. And so type 8 people, or people who lead with type 8, are just have these gifts of leadership, assertiveness, of protecting others, but they might struggle with being overly aggressive, or being controlling, and others might experience them as overly direct or blunt. And their focus of attention is really on power or control, and they prioritize empowerment and fairness and direct action. And they tend to see, type 8s tend to see the world as hard or unjust, and thus they tend to hide their vulnerability to protect themselves and gain a sense of respect or self-worth. Type 9, who is in the middle of 8 and 1, have a tremendous gift for empathy, the ability to see different perspectives. They're incredible mediators. They also have a tendency to be overly passive or have difficulty knowing their own desires and asserting them in groups of people. Their attention is really focused on the other people's perspectives, other people's agendas, and their priorities are really around harmony and inclusion. And they believe that the world needs to, that they need to blend in with the world to avoid conflict. And so they're very focused on comfort and belonging as a substitute for their own sense of love and self-worth. And then lastly, in the body space are type 1s. Type 1s are incredibly discerning. They have very high standards of themselves and others, a really strong sense of integrity, but they might also struggle with rigidity or perfectionism, and they have a very, very powerful inner critic. They're really focused on kind of what's right and wrong, or on reforming things, improving things, making things better. And they're really focused on wanting to be a good person. And they believe the world requires people to be good in order to be accepted. And so they tend to focus on getting love and a sense of self-worth through doing the right thing and behaving in the right way. So I'll pause there before I go into any of the other centers.
Yeah, I love how you're explaining the types by the body centers or the intelligence centers. I think that's such a great way to look at it. I want to just highlight this comment from Dan, who says he's a 7-wing 8 and should be asleep already. So, Dan, glad you are with us. Glad you are with us. So, as you were talking, I heard a lot of myself in the 1. I see that. And I think when I first looked at the Enneagram, I was like, oh, I must be a 1 until I kept reading. So you want to continue with the next 3?
Sure. Although it piques my interest hearing, Amanda, about your experience and wanting to dig into that more. So the next center of intelligence is the heart. And that is where types 2, 3, and 4 live. And there's an emotion around there's an emotion around, oh God, Amanda, I apologize. And for folks who are listening, I'm pregnant, and pregnancy brain is a real thing. And the emotion is not coming to me right this second. But those in this space are focused on kind of whether it be their own feelings or other people's feelings. And that presents differently within the types. And really a lot around self-image, and not image necessarily in the way we think of image in terms of, how we're presented, how we present, it looks different for each of the 3 types. And so type 2 are really focused on, let me start with the gifts. So they have incredible gifts of generosity, of empathy, of nurturing others, but they struggle to take care of their own needs. They are very self-sacrificing a lot of times, and they might have an inflated sense of self or false humility. The focus of their attention is really on others, and their priority is really around relationships and connection. And what type 2s believe is that they must always be giving to receive connection and be valued, and that the way to be loved is by loving others and giving to others. Type 3 have the gifts of charisma. They're really productive, very adaptable people, really high achieving individuals. But they might struggle with, being workaholics, being overly focused on how they're being perceived by others, that image that I was talking about, and a fear of failure. They're really focused on tasks, to-dos, accomplishments. And their core motivation is to really gain recognition through achievement or maintaining that successful image. And they tend to believe that they're rewarded for what they do rather than who they are. And so their focus is on kind of those tasks and those goals to maintain the sense of positive self-image in the eyes of others. And then lastly, in the Heart Center are type 4. Type 4s have an incredible gift of creativity, just really like an emotional depth, and an ability to be with difficult emotions, incredible self-expression. And they might struggle with being overly self-absorbed, feeling misunderstood. Their focus of attention really goes to what's missing, what isn't there, and their priority is to live with authenticity and to have meaning in their lives. Type 4s tend to see the world as a place that's abandoned them, which results in a sense of disconnection. And so their focus is really on searching for that ideal love or those perfect circumstances to feel that sense of completion and wholeness.
Yeah. Those are the ones, like that grouping, somewhere between 1 and 3. Like when you read 1, I was like, "Ooh, that could be me." And then 3, I'm like, "Ooh, that also could be me." But I generally fall right smack dab in between, like as a solid number 2. Like that's how I lead. That's how I've always been. And it's been so interesting to really dive in. But I don't want to ramble yet because I know there are folks listening, like our friend Gina, who is listening from India. It's
Hey,
early
Gina.
morning. So I want to make sure that we cover all of the types before we chat a little bit more.
Yes. Before I do that, I do have to say that another beautiful element of the Enneagram, because I said the Enneagram is so complex, are our wings. And so our wings live on either side of our main home base type. And so if you, Amanda, connect with type 2, you would have 2 wings, type 1 and type 3. So it makes sense that you feel that connection with those other types as well. And then I will also mention, it's also really interesting to think about how we are conditioned. A lot of women mistype as type 2 because we are taught to be helpful. We are conditioned that being helpful is the way to be loved. And that might not necessarily be who we are in terms of our core motivations. That's our conditioning. And then also, it's really fascinating to think about the Enneagram type of the society that we live in. And so we live in a type 3 society here, me and you at least, on the East Coast of the United States. And so how does that influence our understanding of our type as well?
Yeah, that is really interesting. I've never thought about where we live having a type of its own. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And so we're ending with my home base. I love that we have all these 7s in the audience, Amanda.
Yeah, this is great because you said you're a 7. You lead with a
I
7.
also lead with type 7. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So ending with the head types. So the head types are really in that cognitive knowing space. And the underlying emotion that head types grapple with is fear. And that presents itself in different ways for the 3 different types. And so starting with type 5, type 5 have the incredible gifts of objectivity. They're deep thinkers. They're the people who develop deep expertise in subject matters. They love learning about everything, but they may struggle with isolation over intellectualization and withdrawing from people in the world. Their focus of attention really goes to feeling intruded upon and what others expect of them. And their priorities are really around knowledge, expertise, and personal autonomy. Type fives tend to see the world as intrusive and demanding, and they want to protect themselves by limiting their own desires as well as accumulating knowledge. And then we have type six. Type six have the gifts of loyalty. They're super prepared. They have an incredible ability to think through, anticipate, and solve problems. But they may struggle with skepticism and doubt and being overly cautious. Their attention really goes to potential threats and hazards, and their priority is to achieve security by being prepared. Type sixes tend to see the world as unpredictable and hazardous, and they try to create a sense of security and certainty as a way to manage their fear. And so type six is really interesting. There's the counterphobic six and the phobic six. And these are the two different ways they address their fear. In a phobic manner, they just avoid their fear. And then actually there are some sixes who are counterphobic sixes where they're actually running towards their fear to overcome it. So very, very interesting. And lastly, we have type seven. I lead with type seven. Type sevens have a real gift of spontaneity, of optimism, of creativity, of a desire to experience the world. But we also have a tendency towards escapism, a difficulty with commitment, a focus on seeking pleasure and not embracing the full spectrum of experience of life. And the focus of attention is really to, again, that pleasurable and enjoyable possibilities. And the priority is really to enjoy life fully with as many options. And type sevens tend to see the world as limiting. And in order to protect themselves from that limitation, it's by engaging in as many pleasurable activities as possible and imagining all of these potential future possibilities. And while type sevens might not seem fearful on the surface, there's a lot of fear of pain, a fear of the difficulty of life that we're running away from, and it takes the shape of pleasure. So you can see how it takes a very different flavor for each of the head types.
Yeah, so all of this is so fascinating.
Hmm.
So for folks who are listening, who don't know their type, there's probably a whole bunch of people listening who, as they heard you describe it, were like, "Oh, I definitely lead with that type." But for folks for whom it's not clear, how can folks find out what type they lead with?
Yeah. So there are a few pathways. One pathway I mentioned earlier in our time, which is working with a certified Enneagram practitioner like myself, who's been trained in the narrative school, which means it's really about knowing people's stories and understanding kind of not just what the answers to a multiple choice assessment are, but really kind of unpacking someone's core motivations over the span of a 50 to 60-minute interview with a practitioner. That's one pathway. Then there are two other pathways, which are ultimately the two different schools that have broken around the Enneagram. There's the Rizzo-Hudson school, and then there's the narrative school with David Daniels and Helen Palmer, who I studied with. The Enneagram Institute has a assessment that one can take on their website. And then I also shared with you, Amanda, the Narrative Enneagram School link. Amazing. And there is an assessment on that on their page. And it's interesting because their assessment is not a multiple choice assessment in the way that Rizzo-Hudson assessment is. This is really where you read some paragraphs and you have to figure out which of these paragraphs feels the most like you. And so it's not as kind of prescriptive as the Rizzo-Hudson assessment is. And then another option is to pick up a book about the Enneagram. Again, I would recommend David Daniels as a person to look into. He has a it has the assessment in there, and it has, I'm just looking on my shelf to see if I can find it quickly. I have so many books around here. Here it is. It's called The Essential Enneagram. And just to actually read for yourself about the different types and sit with them and see what resonates for you. That's also another option.
Awesome. Thank you for all of that. So let's say we follow one of those pathways, we discover which type we lead with. What do we do then?
Well, I will say, don't follow the path that turned Amanda off to the Enneagram, right? Like, don't make this your identity and then pigeonhole yourself and use it as a way to explain why you make the choices that you make, excuses for yourself, and like have this be this all-consuming sense of self. That's not the purpose of the Enneagram. And what I would say is, once you know which type that you lead with, I would offer curiosity and compassion as the two pathways for working with the Enneagram. How can I be more curious about why I'm making the choices that I'm making, why I'm taking the steps that I'm taking, why I'm doing what I'm doing? And then through the lens of the Enneagram, how might I also offer some compassion to myself about why it is that I made this choice or made this decision or feel this way? That would be what I would offer, is curiosity and compassion being the path forward.
Yeah, and I love those two words. Curiosity is one of my very core values, and I love to lead with curiosity. What I love about the Enneagram too is not just the insight it gives me into me, but the insight it gives me into those that I love when I understand the type that they lead with. So, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So my husband and I have used the Enneagram in our marriage and better understanding one another. And ultimately, it really opens up the space to be more compassionate to one another. My husband leads with type 6. And, there are times when I feel like, he's being overly cautious or really risk averse, and I just want to go on this adventure. And, as opposed to being judgmental of that, how can I meet him where he's at to make sure that he feels prepared in the way that he needs to feel prepared, or understand what his needs are, so that either we can go on that adventure together or maybe make the decision that this is one he wants to sit out, right? So I think it's just a wonderful tool for understanding your loved ones better, not to fix them or change them, but to offer more grace to one another in your relationship.
Yeah, and that's so beautifully put. And I love how you said earlier that we aren't supposed to use the type that we lead with as a way to pigeonhole ourselves or other people, like, oh, she's going to behave that way because she's a 7. Ooh, she's a 2. Yeah, you know what's going to come. Um, and I think um, it's so powerful when we take a step back and really look at why am I behaving the way I'm behaving? What is the underlying motivation there? Because for me, um, as someone who leads with type 2, I am always looking for how I can nurture those around me, how I can help, how I can solve their problems. And I've always felt that I show love by anticipating your needs before you and solving them before you even know that you had this need, right? And so I just assumed that everyone in the world did that. And if people around me didn't do that to me, it's clearly because they didn't love me or don't love me enough or care enough to like do the things because it's like obvious what I need, except it's not. That I think one of the gifts that I have is really being able to see and anticipate those needs in a way that my beautiful husband does not,
Mhm.
or my children do not. And I think it's powerful to be able to use our gifts to really make our relationships better, to make the world a better place. And I think it's so wonderful that we have um, such numerous gifts, in the Enneagram. And I love what you said about we all have some of this type. So even though I lead it with a 2, I can also borrow from here and from there. And I think
Totally.
that is really amazing.
Yeah. And then I love what you said, Amanda, about like really recognizing it's ultimately like the gifts of your type and this ability to anticipate what others need. And what I would offer, and I'm just using this as kind of you asked me what's next, is really checking in whether that is your type on autopilot
Mm.
or whether that this is really the moment, the situation, the relationship to be using your gifts. And it's really bringing that awareness and thus providing you with more agency and more choice in how you're showing up and how you're interacting with others in the world.
Yeah, and I love that you said that because there is such a difference in how I show up in the world when I'm going on autopilot and when I'm showing up with intention and attention. That it's similar and also very, very different.
Yeah, I bet it feels really
Yeah,
different.
yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, so you have um you have some really interesting um stuff happening in your life, because normally at this point I say, so let tell us how people can work with you, how do you help, all of these things. So do you want to talk about that for a
Yeah,
minute
and
or
I
so?
do want to say something important around this because I'm growing a human as we speak. And um, the Enneagram is both um, a representation of nature and nurture. We are born with our type structures, and our type structure is also created throughout by our caregivers throughout our experience. And so it's super important that we don't type children. So you might feel like, I'm really curious, like I wonder what Enneagram type my child will be, and yet that's not something that I will not type my child. That's their own journey to go on later in life. So I just want to caution, all of the parents out there or caregivers out there that we're still developing until age 25. So making sure that we're not pigeonholing anyone into an identity. So yes, I am having we are having our first child in June, and so I am headed out on maternity leave for probably until the new year of 2025, which is just crazy to say out loud. And so I am taking time away from my coaching practice. And when I return, I plan on offering standalone typing interviews for folks that are curious about just kind of working to know what their type is. And then also those who are interested in working with me in a coaching capacity. So for a longer period of time. So that is, one that I am, thanks to Amanda's reminder as I'm managing things, opening up a wait list for, so that folks can just drop their name and their email and I can follow up with you. So thank you so much, Amanda, for one, helping me think through that, and then two, for dropping the link in the chat that you just did, that folks can give me their name and email and I can follow up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so we have, for folks who are here with us tonight, a little gift, because this is journaling and the Enneagram. So Jessika has so graciously given us a beautiful journal prompt to use, which is: how might understanding your core motivations through the lens of your Enneagram type encourage you to be more self-compassionate? Which is so beautiful. And I love using journal prompts like this to be able to really dig deeper and to think about things that my brain likely would not think of on its own, or dive a little deeper. So this, Jessika, is such a beautiful journal prompt. And I love, again, the lens of compassion and self-compassion that you have really led with for this conversation. So if you are curious to journal some more, I do have a journaling membership program that's really, really fun. This is an opportunity to get a series of journal prompts delivered to you each month as we journal in, around, and through a different topic each month. Right now, we are focused on productivity. Next month is health and wellness. I think after that is fun and playfulness, something like that. So we have all kinds of really great things coming up, and we also have these beautiful group journaling sessions, which are just pure magic. So if you are interested in learning more, here is the link for that. And to get a hold of Jessika and to find her, here is her LinkedIn. So awesome. Jess, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your expertise. And I really appreciate you so much.
Oh, it was such a pleasure to, mainly, I have to say, number one, get to spend some time with you. And then two, to get to talk about the Enneagram in this way. And I love the pairing of the Enneagram and journaling, and just a real shout out for the work that Amanda does and the power of that group experience, that I love that you offer both the individual journaling as well as that group experience. And what an incredible way to deepen that self-discovery and that self-awareness.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, my friend. And thank you for tuning in out there. I hope you will join us again next week. I have another guest who I think you'll love. And we will see you next time.
Take care.